Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. It's a Lyme disease Q&A webinar where you create the webinar with your questions. And no two webinars seem to be alike, although sometimes we do get into a theme in our webinars based on the questions that you ask. So we'll see what happens with that tonight. Tonight, I'm only going to be available to participate in the webinar for an hour. Unfortunately, I had an obligation that came up earlier today that I'm going to need to deal with later. So anyhow, we'll be doing this up until about 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, and then I'll be moving on. So for those of you that are interested in further webinars, there'll be one next week and the week after that too. Okay, so we have a total of 4 scheduled for January. We've done one last week, this week, and then we have 2 more. I am creating a recording of the webinar tonight, and so tomorrow morning you will get an email from me with information about how to watch that recording. If you happen not to get the email, you can find a copy of the recording on the homepage of treatlyme.net. You can also find it, that's the Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. You can also find it on my supplement store website, which is Marty Ross MD Supplements. At treatlyme.com. You'll find it all the way down at the bottom on the homepage. You'll find it on Facebook tomorrow, and you can also find it on my YouTube channel as well too. So those are the various places that you can see the recording if you happen to need more information, aren't able to write it down quick enough tonight, or if you're not able to figure out where to find it on my Lyme disease information website. Keep in mind that many things that we talk about, you can actually find written information about on Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD, and I'll probably show you that site as well tonight too. Okay, so for those of you that are new to this idea of the webinar with me, the way you participate is listen in. There's a lot of good things to learn from people's questions, but the other way to participate is write a question, and you do so through that chat box down there on the bottom right-hand side. I ask that you only hit the enter key as you're writing the question when you're completely done with the question. Each time that you hit the enter key, it actually creates a separate question, which gets to be hard for me to manage. During the webinar, if you're participating in the live version, not a recorded version, you will actually see the questions posted, and I will read them. So those that are not in the live version can still hear it, because in the non-live version, the question showing up on your screen does not show up. Okay, but in the live version, which you are participating in tonight, you'll be able to see that question, but I will read it anyhow. Okay, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started here. At least I try. There we are. Okay, let's see. Hello, Kate. Let's see. Do cyst forms remain as cyst when under antibiotic attack, or do they convert? Why does the paramycin, a 250 milligram bottle or 250 bottles, say to use for up to 3 months? Can I use it longer? Okay, so the answer is so paramycin, everyone, is an allergy research product that is grapefruit seed extract. The supplement grapefruit seed extract. Grapefruit seed extract, there are some Petri dish experiments that show on Petri dishes that it can kill cyst forms of Lyme. So I use it and have recommended it as a support to treat cyst form of the Lyme germ. There really are no limits. I'm not quite sure why the manufacturer decided to put 3 months on the bottle, but there is no limit. You're not going to hurt yourself by using it for more than 3 months. Generally, in the treatments that I have recommended when it comes to prescription antibiotics, I usually like to, as many of you know from my site, I usually suggest rotating antibiotics about every 6 months, and that's just to prevent resistance. The thing is about herbs, you tend to find less chance of resistance developing. So I don't think there'd be any problem using grapefruit seed extract for even more than 6 months, for instance, maybe even up to a year. I don't think there'd be a problem with that. Okay. All right. Let's see. Now, do cyst forms remain as cyst when under antibiotic attack, or do they convert? Okay. So everyone, the Lyme germ exists in 2 separate forms, and also lives inside and outside of cells. Okay, so there's Lyme can live intracellularly inside of cells, and Lyme can live outside of cells. Now, interesting enough, the infectious disease doctors generally, as a group, tend to refuse to believe the idea that they can live inside cells. They think this stuff is all living outside the cells, so you don't have to worry about the inside the cells. I discovered that point when I was doing research for my book that I published about what do you use to kill the various Lyme germs. It was pretty interesting about where the literature says the infectious disease doctor community generally is here. But it can live inside, outside cells, okay? All right, then there's the spirochete form of the Lyme germ. That's the thing many of you have seen pictures of. Looks like a corkscrew, okay? That's one form of the germ. The other form of the germ goes by many different names, and so it gets really confusing when you start reading about Lyme. This other form, I call the cyst form. Some people call it the L form. Some people call it round bodies, okay? So you can see it really gets confusing, but they're all the same thing. Cyst, round bodies, L form, those are all the same, okay? And basically, it's a form of Lyme, or kind of Lyme that develops, can exist in you at all times, but becomes more prevalent when the spirochetes are under attack by antibiotics, okay? We consider the cyst to be a protective form. So when you're on antibiotics that is treating the cyst or the spirochete form of the germ and treats intracellular and extracellular Lyme, many of those forms will convert into the cyst form, which is a protective form, okay? So that's how cysts can come about. And then often as the antibiotics go away, the germ will come back out of cyst form and go into the spirochete, okay? The other thing that happens to spirochetes when they're being treated, and the Lyme germ when they're being treated, in addition to forming cysts, they may move into what are called biofilm communities. Biofilm communities are basically Lyme germs that develop a sugar slime covering. And the biofilm is made up of this mucopolysaccharide sugar slime and a protein skeleton that holds it together. Also living in the biofilm are a bunch of other bacteria, many other kinds of bacteria. And you almost get a community where certain bacteria have certain functions, other bacteria have other functions. Like you've got the post office and you've got the supplement store. You've got various functions that take place in this biofilm community, okay? And again, the biofilms tend to come on more when the germ is under stress, predominantly from antibiotics, all right? So I hope that gives you some information there. In terms of what to use to treat cyst herbally, grapefruit seed extract, which you can find in the paramyocidin 250. The other thing that can treat it, according to Petri dish experiments and just based on the success I had when I was treating Lyme in my practice, is to use a combination of two herbs. One is called otoba bark, and the other one is cat's claw. Those usually come as liquid tinctures. I have articles on my website about how to use those as well too, all right? So I'm gonna do a quick screen share here just to show you where you can find some of this information I just talked about. Okay, so this is my website, Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. This is my Lyme disease information site. The page that I have pulled up here is for my book called Anti-Germ Action Plans for Lyme Disease. This book includes articles in it about how do you kill Lyme, how do you kill Bartonella, Babesia, Ehrlichia, yeast, parasites, and viruses. Also Clostridium difficile, which is a bacteria you can get that grows too much in your intestines sometimes when you're on antibiotics, okay? And essentially what this is a compendium of information that you can find on my website under this tab, the Online Lyme Guide under Infection Treatment Plans, all right? So essentially what's in here is in the book. Some people prefer to have a written version of it that they can carry around, so that's why I made the publication. You can get it as paperback. You can download it here, down here, as a PDF if you want, or you can buy it as a paperback at Amazon, or you can get it a Kindle version as well too, okay? All right, now what's in here is pretty similar to what's in this chapter called Infection Treatment Plans, except it's been cleaned up and I've done a little bit more of a thorough job referencing what's in the book here, all right? So if you're looking for information, just remember that, all right? All right, so now in the Infection Treatment Plans chapter, in terms of what I just described about Lyme disease and what the various forms are, you can take a look at my article called A Lyme Disease Antibiotic Guide. And in here, I explain that the germ, basically that the different things you need to consider in treating. And as you have to treat all forms, and up here I explain spirochetes and cyst, and that you've got to treat Lyme living inside and outside of cells as well too, okay? All right. In this article, I also tell you what herbs you can use to treat cyst Lyme, and they're the ones that I was just describing to you, and it gives you information about how to use them. All right, let me go back here. All right, Kay, thanks for that question. Good luck to you. Oops, let's see, I guess I already got that one. All right. Hello, Anna. Do you recommend vaccines such as the flu vaccine for those with Lyme? So one thing you have to be concerned about when deciding whether to do vaccines when somebody has Lyme, it's an issue of weighing out risk and benefits, okay? So one of the things that we see when people have vaccines is that it seems that Lyme can get more active. So there's a risk in Lyme getting more active when you have vaccines. On the other hand, some of the illnesses that you're vaccinating against have bad risk involved with them too. So for instance, getting polio can be very devastating, okay? Now, when you consider the things that you're vaccinating against, you have to make a consideration as to whether even the vaccine is effective and whether that illness may cause you great harm or not. So for instance, with the flu vaccine, I generally have not recommended the flu vaccine in the past. And that is because when we look at the success rate of the flu vaccine in any season, the average shows that it works maybe 40 to 50% of the time. The people that develop the vaccine never quite get it right. It's complicated. I mean, they're not to blame for that. It's a complicated thing to develop the vaccine to be the correct strain for the one of the year that we have. But it only works about 40, 50% of the time. So I question if it's a good thing to do, and I usually don't recommend for something that only works 40 to 50% of the time, that could make your Lyme a lot worse. I usually do not recommend the flu vaccine. Now, however, having said that, if we get into a really killer strain year where the flu is killing everyone, then it may be a good idea to get the flu vaccine again. Okay, so you gotta weigh out risk and benefits, okay? And there's kind of a discussion you need to do with each of the vaccines. I'm only gonna use the flu as an example because that's the most prevalent one to consider. But in terms of the risk and benefits of any of the vaccines, could you get measles? Could you get mumps? Could you get rubella, like the MMR vaccine? Possibly. Could you get pertussis, as in the DPT vaccine? Maybe. So those are things you have to weigh out. But in general, I'll pick on just one, which is the flu vaccine. I'm not a big proponent of it. I have articles about that at Treat Lyme that you can take a look at too. Okay? All right. Thanks for the question, Anna. Oh, one thing I should say, let me just do a quick screen share here too. Okay, so this is back at a Treat Lyme by Marty Ross MD. All right, so in terms of, now look at this chapter called Infection Treatment Plans. I think what I'm looking for is here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So what are you going to do? If you don't want to do the flu vaccine, what steps can you take to deal with virus infections or even the flu if you get them? And what can you do to prevent them? All right. So I take a look at this article. I've written an article about it. It's called Stop Cold, Flu, and Viruses in Their Tracks. It tells you the kinds of things that you want to do. One thing is to have so I'll go back here, but I'm going to just take a look at that article later. Okay, let me go back so you can see me here. I can see you. Well, I can't see you, but so that I'm broadcast better. So anyhow, the one thing you could do during viral season, whether it's the flu you get, might be getting respiratory viruses, diarrhea. At the first sign that you start getting something viral, you can limit how long it's going to last. In fact, you can get it so that sometimes it's just 24 hours that it's bothering you, okay? And one of the ways that I found helpful to do that is to use something called thymus gland protein A, all right? So your thymus gland is a gland that sits under your chest bone right here. It makes this protein called thymus gland protein A, which quickly turns on the antiviral fighting part of your immune system to attack viruses, okay? And if you use that thymus gland protein A, which is sold, one way it's sold is as a product called ProBoost, But the thymus gland protein A, if you use it right away, especially somewhere within the first 48 hours of getting sick, it can really turn things around fast. And the way that I would recommend that people do it is 1 pack of powder under the tongue. It comes as powder. Put 1 packet of powder under your tongue 3 times a day on day 1 and day 2, and then don't take it anymore. On that first day, you want to dose every 2 hours 3 times. So those 3 times you take it on that first day, make them 2 hours apart. Get the stuff in really quick, okay? The other thing you can do if you want to help boost up your immune system on an ongoing basis so that it can deal with viruses that might come at you, I usually like using during viral season something called reishi mushrooms or reishi gano mushrooms. Mushrooms have a sugar in them that helps turn on the cells, rev them up, get them ready. The type of cells that fight viral infections, okay? And of the various kinds of mushrooms you can use to do that, it appears that reishi is a good support for keeping boosting the immune system to keep viruses under control. So sometimes a person has, during flu season or other viral seasons, they tend to be getting everything that comes along. One of the things I would suggest is reishi gano. That's the variety of a reishi gano mushrooms, 400 milligrams, 3 times a day during the entire flu season and viral season up, say, till maybe March or April, as a means of trying to prevent getting those infections, having your immune system revved up and ready to go, okay? There's some other ideas in that article too, but those are 2 things you might want to think about as an alternative to the flu vaccine. And the other thing is I do have an article on the flu vaccine. I meant to show you when I was at the site. In the search box up at the top, just go ahead and write flu vaccine and you'll find the article on that, okay? All right. Thanks for that question, Anna. Hello, Bill. Let's see. I was 1 month into a Bartonella treatment and developed SIBO. Stopped the Bartonella treatment and focused on the yeast. I did 1 month of nystatin with some improvement, then added the fluconazole 10 days ago. Felt worse the first few days, but stayed on and things are pretty much back to normal. I'm still having Bartonella clinical symptoms and obviously need to get back on the Bartonella treatment. What is your recommendations on when to stop the yeast treatment and restart the Bartonella treatment? Okay, so I just want to clarify a few things. Okay, so SIBO stands for small intestinal bowel or bacteria overgrowth. Okay, so SIBO means that you get too many bacteria from your large intestines that move up into the small intestines and create a light gassiness. All right, that probably is not what you've had going on, because the way we treat SIBO doesn't have anything to do with yeast, actually. Yeast overgrowth can also make you gassy and bloated and usually is triggered by being on antibiotics. And I suspect that's probably what's going on here with you is yeast overgrowth from what you described. Yeast overgrowth in the large intestines, not the small intestines, the large intestines, okay? All right, so typically when you treat yeast with a combination of nystatin and fluconazole like you're doing, it typically takes about 30 days to get everything completely under control. But usually by around 2 weeks to 3 weeks into using that combination, both of those together simultaneously at the same time, usually about 2 to 3 weeks in, most symptoms will have improved and you'll be back on your way, okay? In my own practice, when I was practicing in Seattle, Washington, seeing patients, if somebody developed yeast and they were on a Bartonella and a Lyme antibiotic treatment, I often would not even stop the antibiotics. Okay, I want you to hear that. I probably would not, if you were my patient, how I've worked in the past, I wouldn't stop the antibiotics. I'd just add in nystatin and fluconazole and bump up your probiotics, double probably whatever you were doing. I would double what you were doing before. And that you can often stay on the antibiotics then, okay? You want to treat though with the nystatin and the diflucan for a minimum of 30 days. Probably you could get back right on your Bartonella treatment now and not wait any longer. Again, as I said, in my practice, I would not even stop the antibiotics unless I found that I couldn't get the yeast under control maybe after a month or 2. Then I might stop the antibiotics for a little bit, okay? Now, the problem with stopping antibiotics when you're treating Bartonella is that Bartonella replicates every 24 hours. All right, so a lot of the gains you might have made by treating Bartonella may be gone now, because during those days that you've been off of Bartonella, it's been replicating. It's coming back really fast, okay? On the other hand, when it comes to the Lyme germ, not the Bartonella germ, but the Lyme germ, Lyme replicates really slowly. Some people say every 7 days. Some people say up to a month. This stuff grows so slow that you can be off of antibiotics for even a month or two and not have any major complications or setbacks develop with that germ from being off the antibiotics, okay? So it's okay to interrupt your Lyme germ treatment, but I generally did not and do not recommend interrupting Bartonella or Babesia, because Babesia replicates pretty quickly. I usually do not recommend interrupting a Bartonella or Babesia treatment until they're done. So that often is why I just keep using the antibiotics even when I was treating an active yeast infection, okay? All right. So if y'all are wondering, so one way to treat the active yeast is what Bill's been doing, which is that nystatin and diflucan. I also have on my Treat Lyme information site, if you look in the my online guide, you can see a chapter on yeast here. And in here, there's an article that you can use to help figure out, do you have yeast? There's this other article that talks about the various options you have to get rid of those yeast, both herbal and prescription options. Okay, all right. Central to it, though, is being on good probiotics. All right. Okay. This article about information about how to kill yeast, what do you do to get rid of it? This one right here on the right, that is also included in my book under this tab right here. Okay. All right. Let me go back. All right. Thanks, Bill, for that question. Good luck to you. Hello, Lisa. Good evening. What are your thoughts on the combination of doxyrifampin and PZA? Just so you know, that initials get to be a little complicated because not everyone uses the same initials for the same drug. What I think you mean is pyrazinamide, is the PZA that you're talking about. Also, was wondering if you can share the latest with your license status, since I'm looking for a Lyme litter medical doctor. Okay, let me talk about. I'll talk about the license status last. Let me go to the antibiotics. All right. So this combination of doxy and rifampin and pyrazinamide would be a combination probably somebody's using to treat Bartonella. Okay. So the rifampin and pyrazinamide are both actually antibiotics that we would use to treat tuberculosis. They seem to get and work in the what's called the intracellular space pretty well, and that is where Bartonella lives. It lives inside of cells. The best treatments to treat Bartonella involve at least 2 antibiotics that will get inside the cells, and sometimes we wind up having to use 3, okay? Now, in terms of this combination with this doxyrifampin pyrazinamide, the rifampin, based on my experience, also has some activity against the cyst form of the Lyme germ and intracellular Lyme. The doxy is good for spirochete and intracellular Lyme. So that combination of doxyrifampin actually is a good Lyme treatment. It treats both places where Lyme lives, in and out of cells, and it treats spirochete and cyst, okay? I have not seen any information about whether pyrazinamide is useful for treating the Lyme germ. There are some of my colleagues, I believe Horowitz has been using it. Maybe even Steve Phillips has been using it to treat in some of their Bartonella treatments. I have used it as part of Bartonella treatments before, and at least in the people I've used it in the past, I did not see great benefit by adding that in, okay? If you're looking for third antibiotics that you can use in combination with the doxyrifampin, you could add Bactrim, which is a sulfa antibiotic. You could add Zithromax, or you could add Biaxin. Those would be good alternatives that you could add to the pyrazinamide if you don't want to do the pyrazinamide. Okay? All right. All right. Now, regarding, oh, and then so there, I'm just going to do a quick screen share here. Okay, so in my in terms of what do you use to treat Bartonella, what do I recommend? So you'll see my articles don't have pyrazinamide in them because I still think in terms of treatments, it tends to be a little bit more experimental. There's a couple of doctors that have been using it. And again, in my practice, I just didn't see great benefit. Doesn't mean it won't work. I just didn't see great benefit on it, okay? And there's no research about it. That's the biggest problem with all of this. We don't really have a lot of research to guide us, okay? But this article called Kills Bartonella, A Brief Guide, in here I lay out 3 different tiers of treating of antibiotic combinations or herbal antibiotic combinations that you could use to get rid of Bartonella. So for instance, tier 1, which is the strongest ones, would have a combination of either rifampin or rifabutin. These are in the same family, coupled with a minocycline or a Bactrim or an azithromycin. Okay, that's an idea of a tier 1 treatment. There's Bactrim-based treatments that are in tier 1 too, etc. Read through here, you'll see the various options that I give. But you'll notice in this article, I don't have anything about pyrazinamide, and it's just because not that it could not work, it's just that I didn't have an extensive amount of experience using it in my practice, and in the people who I did use it on, I did not see great benefits from it. I'll put it that way, okay? All right, let me go back here. All right. Thank you for that question, Lisa. Oh, my license. So many of you know I've left Washington State, where the board has been after me for managing Lyme disease for about 4 years now. And they escalated their activities against me. And I finally said, and it looked like they were going to shut me down pretty quickly. They're not happy with how I use integrative medicines, alternative medicines, and the fact that I use ongoing antibiotics to treat Lyme. I thought they would have taken some action. It's still being investigated. I was expecting negative action with about a 90% certainty, which is why I left and moved out to Texas. Okay, so from Texas, I'm here. I'm basically running my store, and I'm running my Lyme disease information site. In Washington State, if they were to remove my license for various reasons, the way the law reads, I couldn't even maintain the supplement store, nor would I be able to provide webinars like this, nor would I be able to provide written information about Lyme. They wouldn't even let me put the letters MD after my name if they removed my license in Washington State, meaning they wouldn't let me recognize my education. I'm a medical doctor. I trained as a medical doctor. I'm educated as a medical doctor, but they wouldn't even let me use MD after my name. That's why I left Washington State. So the problem is so the situation is still ongoing in Washington. I thought there would be some movement by the board by now. They haven't. I don't know when it's going to happen. It could be anywhere from now to maybe even another year from now before we see if they're going to move to actually suspend or revoke my license or not. Okay. The problem is here in Texas, given what's happened up in Washington State, even if I am able to maintain my Washington license, because I am working to do that, I still am fighting it. It's very doubtful that I would be able to be licensed down here in Texas. So to answer your question, I think there is an extremely small possibility that I am going back into clinical practice again, either here or here, definitely in Texas. And at this point, since I've moved here, I'm kind of reticent to go back to Washington State, where my board has is basically targeted me for further action. So anyhow, Lisa, I think you'd be better off looking for somebody else. And I'm sorry about that. I do miss doing clinical practice, but I just, given what's happened up there over the last 4 years, they've put a target on my back that will even make it very difficult for me down here or in other jurisdictions to get licensed as well too. Okay. Now, mind you, what got me in trouble up there was helping somebody recover from Lyme and mold toxin illness. And it was a pharmacist that reported me, not the patient. The patient actually had great recovery under my treatment, but the board didn't care about that. So anyhow, that's where we are. All right. Thanks for that question, Lisa. Good luck to you. Hello, John. Let's see. Dr. Ross, I have read that cat's claw is very estrogenic, and many doctors recommend avoiding high estrogenic foods like soy, etc. Can cause prostate problems and muscle loss and other problems. In one study, it was used as birth control for rats. Are there any substitutes for cat's claw that you can combine with the Otoba bark, or do you have any suggestions for minimizing the estrogen from cat's claw? So, John, so yes, cat's claw can have some estrogenic side effect. Now, that doesn't mean it does in everyone. Okay, so in my experience, in terms of seeing that there might be some estrogenic side effects, I would say it occurs maybe 2 or 3% of the time. That's based on my experience, okay? And so although you may read about it being a concern, the reality is in clinical experience, I didn't find as much of a concern. Now, it is a concern if it's happening to you. All right, so there were some people in my practice that I would have to stop cat's claw because they were having an estrogenic effect. The biggest one is actually it can lead to a lot of a pimple formation. Is quite common on the cat's claw. In some women, it can start their periods, etc. Okay, so there's reasons to have to stop it. Okay, so one thing I would do if you can't do the cat's claw that I was doing in my practice would be to use as the next thing to try to substitute would be to use some teasel root. A teasel, that's Teasel. You can I carry that actually too. There's a Wildcraft Herbs product. As many of you know, I like using Wildcraft Herbs, a cat's claw and Wildcraft Herbs, Otoba bark. Those are the things you'll find at my supplement store. But they also offer a teasel root product as well too. The way you would use the teasel is identical to the way that you would use Otoba or cat's claw. And that is I usually would have people start at 5 drops twice a day. And then I would have them increase every other day by 1 drop per dose until a person reaches 30 drops twice a day. And you can take that directly at the same time as the Otoba bark, okay? So that would be what I would look to do is try that combination, see if you can tolerate that okay too. I haven't seen problems with an estrogenic effect with the Otoba, and I have not seen clinically estrogenic effect problems using teasel root either, okay? All right. Good luck to you, John. Hello, Lorraine. Let's see. Thank you for this webinar. You're welcome. Can you tell me if soft tissue plus bone marrow edema, foot and ankle, is likely to be related to Lyme disease and or mast cell disorders? Thank you. You know, I could see where soft tissue edema, which means swelling, fluid swelling in the soft tissues, that means muscles, the tissues that hold things together, that I think can be Lyme related. And maybe even mast cell related too, because mast cells release inflammatory chemicals. Mast cells, everyone, are the type of cells that are found in our bodies where histamines are made. At least historically, we used to think that's all they did is they made histamines. If you were allergic to something, it, along with various antibodies, would land on a mast cell, trigger those mast cells to release histamines. Histamines would give you the watery eyes, itchy nose, and the symptoms of allergies. We now know that these mast cells also manufacture a lot of inflammatory cytokines, all right? Now, many of you that have participated in my webinars or read my information know cytokines are a big deal, all right? So Lyme disease, the symptoms you have of Lyme disease are actually predominantly symptoms of your immune system overacting and making too many cytokines. All right, so cytokines are good and bad. White blood cells, when they see an infection, make cytokines, and what they're supposed to do is cause more white blood cells to be made, draw those white blood cells to where the infection is, and help them work better, okay? But in Lyme, and sometimes in mold toxicity illness, and sometimes in too many yeast, the immune system has a hard time dealing with either of those toxins, as in mold toxin illness, or in Lyme, or against yeast, and tries harder and harder and starts making more and more cytokines, and eventually makes too many cytokines, okay? Too many cytokines are inflammatory, and they give you most of your Lyme symptoms. So they can give you swelling, they can give you achiness, they can make it hard for you to think, they can give you fatigue. I can go down the list of Lyme symptoms, all right? And we now know that mast cells don't only manufacture histamines, they manufacture cytokines. And we now know that infections and mold toxins and yeast and parasites all can stimulate those mast cells, causing them to be more active and more easily make histamines when they're exposed to things that you might be allergic to, okay? So sometimes when people have chronic infections like Lyme disease, or they have mold toxicity illness, over time they start becoming allergic to everything or a lot of things. That's called mast cell activation syndrome. And that's because the infections have triggered these mast cells to make lots of cytokines and lots of histamines. Okay, that's called mast cells. All right, now, in the situation of both, in terms of the edema and soft tissues, yeah, that can be part of Lyme. To be honest with you, I have not seen information about whether you can get bone marrow edema from Lyme. I'm kind of skeptical that you can. Anything is possible, right? I never saw that occur in my practice. It is one of those things that if I saw somebody with bone marrow edema, I would want to be talking to my other specialist, possibly an orthopedist, possibly maybe even an oncologist, to figure out, are there other causes that could be leading to that edema? Okay, all right. I'm sorry, hematologist, oncologist. Hematologists deal with bone marrow as well too. Okay, all right. So anyhow, there you go, Lorraine. I hope that gives you some useful information. Good luck to you. So about the oncologist, I didn't mean to scare you to think that it's cancer that's there, okay? The doctors that deal with bone marrow are the hematologist oncologists. They're a specialist that deals in both aspects. They have that name, hematologist oncologist, okay? All right. Hello, E. Let's see. Thank you for these talks. You're welcome. How would you suggest treating chronic low lymphocytes and CD4? I test negative for cytomegalovirus, Epstein-Barr virus, and HIV. I no longer test positive for Lyme or co-infections. You know, I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I can just give you an observation, okay? I often saw and have seen in my patients with chronic Lyme that is active that they might have low white blood cell counts and even low lymphocyte counts. And that as I got the Lyme under control, those white blood cell counts and lymphocyte counts would return to normal range, okay? So the only thing I would ask you to look at is, how do you know that your Lyme is under control? Okay, it's a hard question, all right, because we don't really have good testing that proves Lyme is under control. I know some of my colleagues are starting to look at using the Armin Labs ELISpot or other labs ELISpots. ELISpot is a test that looks to see, do your white blood cells, your T white blood cells, react when they're exposed to proteins from Lyme germs. And so we draw your blood, we take out your T white blood cells, and we expose them to Lyme proteins, and we see if they make cytokines. And if they make cytokines, that means that they have seen Lyme sometime in the last 2 months, okay? And that's because T white blood cells live for up to 2 months, all right? Now, Armin has been proposing that we can use it as a test to see if we're done with Lyme. And so some of my colleagues now are doing the ELISpots, and if they see that it was positive and now it's negative, they take that as a conclusion that Lyme is gone. And I disagree with that. I don't think there is a way we can test to see that Lyme is gone. The reason I disagree with doing that with the ELISpot test is Lyme hides in you. It can live in tissues where the white blood cells can't see it. So you could have a negative test, but that germ could still be in you and even active in you, okay? So if you think that Lyme, the way that I would make decisions about whether somebody's Lyme was in remission or gone was based on symptoms. So if your testing is negative, the Armin Labs is negative, and your doctor said you're done, again, I disagree with that. But if you still have a lot of symptoms, you may still have active Lyme, causing your white blood cell or lymphocyte counts to be low, okay? Just a question. That's something for you to look at with your doctor, or look at your symptoms and consider, is it true that Lyme is done, okay? Now, I'm not trying to say we have to treat Lyme forever and ever and ever either, but just be careful that if it's done, it really is done. Okay? All right. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. Hold on here, everyone. Oops. gotta get some water. I just spilled it on myself. Hold on here just a minute. All right, let's see here. I tested, hi Christine. I tested positive on Lyme IgG with bands 93, 66, 58, 41, 39, 30, 28, and 18 kDa. The value was positive. What does this mean? The test was by a rheumatologist who never heard of Lyme, done by Arup Lab as a Western blot. Your thoughts? Thank you for continuing this work, Christine. Okay, so the Western blot. So what a Western blot is? Let me just start with that first. Okay, so a Western blot is a test that we can use to see if your immune system is making antibodies that attach to proteins that are found on the covering of the Lyme germ. Okay. All right. So you can, and what antibodies are is they're proteins and they attach to a germ. And once they're attached to the germ, they kind of act like a big signaling tower to other parts of the immune system to come in and attack that germ. They're a signaling device. All right. Now, an antibody, when we make it, does not just grab hold of the whole germ and just hold on to it. Okay. Rather, an antibody holds on to a piece, one part of that germ. And it just so happens that antibodies hold on to the very small proteins found on the covering of a germ. What a germ covering is a layer of fat into which many kinds of proteins are stuck, okay? And we make antibodies against those various proteins. And we make antibodies from two families. There's a family of antibodies called IgG antibodies, all right? And there's another family called IgM antibodies. Generally, when you first get sick with an infection, or not generally, always when you get sick with an infection, you make IgM antibodies first. Those are eventually replaced in most infections by 6 weeks to 3 months by IgG antibodies, okay? Except in Lyme disease. It appears about 80% of the time that somebody has Lyme of a year duration or more, their immune system is tricked into still making IgM antibodies, all right? So that still can happen in Lyme. It's one of the only infections I know of where after the acute phase, you can still keep making IgM antibodies, but it does happen, in my experience, about 80% of the time, all right? All right, but your test was, what you've given me here is information about your IgG antibodies, all right? So what those bands are, those numbers, bands 93 and band 66, what those are is those are the weights of the different proteins that are found on the covering of the Lyme germ, okay? And you have antibodies that are attaching to the protein that weighs 93 kilodaltons, and the protein, and all those other ones, and one of those being the 18 kilodalton protein, okay? All right, now, the test that was done, based on what you just said here, was done using a test kit that was approved to be sold to various labs by the Food and Drug Administration. So I'll call that an FDA test kit, okay? And there's various private manufacturers that manufacture this same test kit that is approved to be sold by the Food and Drug Administration to other companies that use it and then run the test, all right? And that test kit, the FDA approved kit, uses guidelines, a standard of doing the test that was developed by the Centers for Disease Control down in Atlanta, Georgia. And for the IgG, they test to see if you have antibodies against 10 proteins, all right? Now, their standards of what constitutes a positive test is of those 10, if you have antibodies against 5, that's a positive test, okay? So yeah, yours was positive. You had antibodies against 5. I use a different standard. I follow the guidelines of a company called Ione that also runs a Western blot. Their Western blot is not available for resale, so they don't have to have FDA approval of their kit. And they use a bigger standard. They actually test to see if antibodies against 12 proteins, okay? And of those 12, you have to have antibodies against 2 of 6 important ones. And the 6 important ones are the 93, the 39, 41, 31, and 23, okay? And the problem is the FDA kit that was done here doesn't test for the 31 and the 34 that Igenix tests for. All right, so what's the difference? The Igenix method is better at finding it if you have it. The Igenix method will find it if it's there about 80% of the time. The CDC method and their standard of how you interpret it will only find it about 50 to 60% of the time. However, when it finds it, it generally is correct. All right, so even though I would never usually use the CDC FDA kit like your rheumatologist did here, the fact that it came back positive is real. All right, and the number of antibodies you had against these various proteins is very suggestive of Lyme. All right, so if you have a number of symptoms also suggestive of Lyme, that probably means you have Lyme disease. All right, so when we make a decision about whether somebody has Lyme disease, there's 4 things we consider. One is we look at a test result. Number 2, we look to see, do you have enough symptoms that suggest Lyme disease? Number 3, we look at, are there any physical exam findings? And number 4, we consider, is there a possibility you could have gotten it? All right. So the greatest chance of getting it is if you've had a known tick bite. Another great risk is if you happen to live in an area where there's a lot of ticks that carry Lyme, even though you don't remember a tick bite, because sometimes the baby ticks will bite us and we just don't know. Okay. So there's a whole art. So rather than taking this webinar tonight to tell you how to diagnose Lyme, I'm going to show you an article to take a look at. It's a 15-minute video that I created about how do you diagnose Lyme, okay? Because it's not just about the test. Testing can be wrong, even though this looks pretty positive to me. Even so, the test can sometimes be wrong. You can have false positive tests, okay? All right, so you want to make sure that you consider the symptoms, physical exam findings, and what your risks were as well, too. All right, so let me go back. All right, so I'm doing a screen share. All right, so take a look in my online guide. There is an article or a section called How to Diagnose. All right, take a look at this article here called How to Diagnose Chronic Lyme Disease, More Than a Test, okay? And it is a 15-minute video presentation that I had originally given at a Lyme conference, and then I re-recorded it and for my website, okay? All right. All right, Christine, good luck to you. Hello, Jeannie. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. I was diagnosed with Babesia decani, which I've read is the more treatment-resistant type and requires many different types of drugs to treat. My doctor has me on Coartem only, no antibiotics. She says for 6 months. What do you think about that? So Babesia decani often can be harder to treat. Doesn't mean it is always, but often can be, okay? So for non-Babesia decani Babesia, often 4 to 5 months is enough to get over the germ. My experience says that often for Babesia decani, you need to treat for up to 10 months, okay? Can Coartem do it by itself? I've got mixed feelings about Coartem. I usually would use Coartem in my practice as a later resort medicine if other things were not working, okay? And that is because as in general, I just did not find it always to be that effective. All right, I'm sorry to say that, okay? Now, how do you know if it's being effective? Well, look and see. Are your symptoms, while you're on it, are your Babesia symptoms getting better? That's how you can figure it out, okay? So the big symptoms of Babesia to look at are some symptoms that people often will have will be night sweats or big temperature fluctuations, anxiety or panic attacks, air hunger, a feeling like you can't get enough air from time to time. Sometimes people with Babesia have very frequent deja vu symptoms. Sometimes people will have extreme fatigue with Babesia too, okay? And you just need to follow those symptoms and see what happens. Do they get better gradually? And on the right Babesia treatment, whether it's Babesia decani, other strains of Babesia, Babesia microti, or strains that you can't even identify because there's more strains of Babesia than we can test for. But if generally by 1 to 2 months on the right treatment, you should start seeing some improvement in the Babesia symptoms. If not, you need to look at other things, okay? On a coartem, I might sometimes have tried that as an individual drug. The problem with coartem is it's hard to mix with a lot of other antibiotics because coartem can interfere with the electrical conduction system of the heart, and some antibiotics can do the same thing too, like azithromycin, which is Zithromax, or Biaxin. You would not want to mix with coartem. You can't do that because they both can interfere with electrical conduction of the heart, for instance, okay? If you're looking for something to add to the coartem, I might have considered using a tetracycline like a doxycycline, possibly to add to that, okay? But if you're looking for other ideas about how to treat Babesia that I think are stronger and maybe, at least clinically in my experience, more effective than coartem, let me just show you the article that you could take a look at on that, okay? All right, so what I'm going to show you, you can also find in my Treat Lyme book, my Lyme book under this tab, okay, if you want to have it printable or on a Kindle version. But take a look at my infection treatment plans chapter. And take a look at this article called Kills Babesia, a Brief Guide, okay? So anyhow, take a look here. You're going to see that I break my treatments down into 3 different tiers again, with the strongest, most effective ones being in tier 1. Okay. In tier 2, boy, I think I put tier 3 is where I put coartem in here. Let me make sure what I'm trying to figure out where I put coartem. Hold on here a minute. Oh, no. I put coartem as a tier 2 treatment. But again, I would do it as a later resort. I don't find it to be the most powerful way of doing it. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Jeannie. Let's see here. Hello, Brenda. Let's see. I ordered Wildcraft Herbs for Lyme and Bart. The Otobobark and Cryptolaphus both suggest 1 teaspoon is a serving size. I'm very sensitive. It can only take 1 drop in a cup of water of the NutriMedics. Can I mix the Wildcraft tincture with water? What does you recommend to start with? Okay, so I would ignore what the manufacturer puts on the label, okay? So generally, with the Wildcraft products, I dose them the same that I would the NutriMedics products, all right? Having said that, I want you to know that I consider the Wildcraft products in clinical experience to be stronger. And I think they're stronger than the NutriMedics equivalent products for 2 reasons. Number one, they use more plant in their extractions. And their extractions involve 3 parts plant to, 1 part plant to 3 parts of liquid, okay? I believe that the NutriMedics may be 1 to 6 or maybe even less than that. I mean, more dilute than that, okay? However, NutriMedics, in their own defense, say that they have a special extraction method that makes them more strong. I can't be sure about that or not. The other thing I think that makes Wildcraft a little bit more potent is the alcohol that is used to do the extraction is a higher alcohol content, higher proof, which is going to allow a greater extraction of the active chemicals out of those herbs. Okay, so in my experience, I found the Wildcraft herbs to be a little bit stronger, and in some people, a lot stronger than the NutriMedics products. All right, if you were having reaction to 1 drop in a cup of water of the NutriMedics, or in other words, 1 drop of NutriMedics, you might want to start the Wildcraft Herbs products at a half a drop. How do you do half a drop? Well, the way you do half a drop, you take 1 drop, put it in, let's just say, put it in 2 ounces of water. 1 drop in 2 ounces of water. Okay, so that 2 ounces of water is 1 drop. And now drink only 1 ounce of it. That's half a drop. Okay, that's how you do it. All right. So I would consider starting at about half of what you were doing with the NutriMedics dosing on the Wildcraft Herbs. And anyone buying the Wildcraft Herbs, I probably would ignore the dosing instructions I have on the back. If you've noticed in the articles that I write about these, I haven't said change the dosing based on the brand you get. The dosing I recommend for Houtunia, Sitta, and Otoba, and Cat's Claw are for Wildcraft and for Nutrimetics. But I will tell you, I have a general observation that I think the Wildcraft is a bit stronger. Do not follow the dosing instructions on the back of the Wildcraft bottle. All right? All right. Good luck to you, Brenda. Thank you for that question. Hello, Mark. Hi, Doc Marty. Thank you for all you do. You're welcome. We are taking IV glutathione to help with the liver detoxification. It has been suggested we add phosphatidylcholine, 1.3 grams, or 3 times a day in a capsule with meals. Is this to quiet the cytokines or reduce the fire in the brain from ammonia buildup caused by the mold? Do you recommend a supplement for removing the ammonia on the brain? All right, so the IV glutathione is not only is supporting your liver detox, and it's also, as a very strong antioxidant, is helping to lower inflammation. It's lowering oxidizing agents that trigger cytokines to be made, which can help with some of that brain fire. Okay. The other thing that glutathione is doing is it also is used by nerves to do their own detox work as well too. So glutathione is a strong antioxidant used in every one of our cells. All right. Okay. In terms of the phosphatidylcholine is a fat that is used, or is one of the building blocks for the fat covering of nerve cells, or the fat membrane that makes up nerve cells. It may help limit injury and therefore pain from toxicity, okay? And I think taking a capsule form sounds reasonable to me too. In terms of other things to lower ammonia buildup, I'm afraid I don't have good ideas. I know that the Jernigan Clinic, Jernigan's a chiropractor in Kansas that has a Lyme detox clinic, has a couple products that he claims might help lower ammonia. I had seen some people get benefit from that, his products, and people not. Okay, so it's kind of hit or miss, but you might want to take a look at some of his information as well too. Okay, all right. Sorry, I don't have greater information than that, but I like the IV glutathione. I like the idea of the phosphatidylcholine. I don't know that doing something to lower ammonia is going to help or not help, but if you're looking for a way to possibly try, take a look at some of the Jernigan ideas about how to lower ammonia. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Mark, and good luck to who I think you're asking me about as well too. Okay, for privacy, I won't say the name. All right. Hello, Judy. Let's see. I'm ready to wean off, and I think you mean wean off treatment, or the antibiotics at least. I read your updated article for maintenance and wonder how much biocide and LSF should I take? So I would probably, when I'm using, so there is an article, everyone, I have, which is called Finished, How to Prevent Relapse, okay? And there's various recommendations I make about how to prevent relapse. Most of those are targeted at boosting the immune system so that it will help keep the germ under control. But occasionally, some people also need to stay on an antimicrobial, whether herbal or prescription, to police the environment, to swat down any germs that might come back, okay? This is mainly a concern with the Lyme germ. Lyme, I don't think we ever get out completely. I do think there's a 95% chance you can eradicate Bartonella. There's a 95% chance you can eradicate Babesia. There's about that same kind of chance you can eradicate Anaplasma and Ehrlichia. Okay, so when we talk about needing to do some kind of maintenance therapy, it's really just about the Lyme germ. Okay, all right. So biocide and LS. So generally, just a rule of thumb, what I'd suggest with antimicrobials when you're using them to swat things down, to kind of police the environment, is to generally do about half the dosing that you were doing before. Okay. So for instance, biocide and LSF, the way to do that is 2 pumps 3 times a day when you're in active treatment. If you're using it more for relapse prevention, you might look at 2 pumps, 1 pump 3 times a day, or even 1 pump twice a day. Okay, that might be a way to go about doing it. All right. Okay. And there's no science here. There's no proof what's the best amount, but it just doesn't need to be quite as much as what you were doing during active treatment. Okay. All right. All right, Judy. Good luck to you. Thank you for that question. All right, everyone. I told you tonight, unfortunately, I've had I have an obligation that came out earlier today that I need to be to here in a little bit. So I'm going to wind up ending our webinar tonight now in about 7 o'clock. So tomorrow you will get an email from me with a recording of tonight's webinar. Also, you can use that email to sign up for the next 2 sessions of the webinars too. Okay. All right. I've enjoyed being here. I'm sorry I have to go early tonight. I do believe next week we will get the full hour and a half in. So if you do have other questions, feel free to participate next week. Okay. All right. All right. Look out for my email somewhere around 8 to 8:30 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow. Okay. Good night, everyone.